Hello, I'm Dalton Delan. I'm a columnist for the Berkshire Eagle, and this is Eagle Reels, where we take you beyond the news. My special guest today, Joseph O'Neill, novelist, essayist, and as we're going to get to in a moment, cricketer. Welcome, Joe.
I'm delighted to be here, Dalton.
Thank you very much. You're appearing at the end of this last weekend of September in Lenox at a Shakespeare and Company event for the Authors Guild Foundation. You're appearing with your fellow novelist, Jennifer Egan, of the fame of Visit from the Goon Squad and other novels. Do you know Jennifer? And what does an Authors Guild event mean to you?
I've done a thing with Jennifer before. So we bumped into each other in these sort of situations. I can't say that we hang out much as I suspect we'd like to. But it's a very significant honor, I feel, appearing with her. I'm a great admirer of her writing, and I think it's also the occasion is I think made even more kind of special for me because it is a Writers Guild event, and the proceeds go towards the Writers Guild. We're in a very weird and slightly perilous moment for writers as the sort of landscape of media changes and kind of contracts change and, dissemination of our work changes. And the Writers Guild, I think, is more relevant than ever in protecting the interests of writers as they sort of try and navigate this new kind of electronic world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now, to continue on the subject of the community of writers, you grew up as quite a man of the world. Let me see if I can recall Mozambique, Turkey, Iran, and of course the Netherlands. Did that inform that immigrant experience? Did that inform your writing? I'm thinking particularly, for example, of your novel Netherland and throughout your work.
It does, and it informs it whether unconsciously as well as consciously. Most writers have a kind of home turf, and they sort of are able to kind of mine that turf. I'm probably mixing up my metaphors, unless, of course, we're talking about peat in Ireland, is where you can just about apply the mining metaphor to the digging of peat, which was obviously a Seamus Heaney metaphor. But my father was a guy who traveled the world building things, petrochemical things. This was during the 1960s and 70s, and which was a boom time for refineries and other kinds of installations of that kind. And so we followed him around as a family, but it was a very enriching time in some ways. But it also leaves you as a writer with a slight predicament. I can't do what, for example, Philip Roth could do, which is to sort of keep writing about New Jersey obsessively, in the knowledge that that people would, certainly American readers, would connect to that kind of subject, would be familiar with it, and perhaps not directly, but indirectly.
Well, now you cover some things that we in the States are not as familiar as you would like with, one of them being cricket. And I'm thinking of Hans van den Broek in Netherlands and how he played cricket on Staten Island and elsewhere. And I believe you did as well, and perhaps still do.
Well, I'm still a member of the club, and they've dragged me into the kind of operations of the committee of the club. So I have to do stuff for the club to keep it going. But my playing days are pretty much behind me by almost. I've almost been forced into retirement because cricket involves sprinting, a bit like baseball that involves sprinting to first base. Cricket involves, if you like to bat, you have to sort of sprint between the wickets. In the case, and my hamstrings just kept going. So eventually, it was a signal that I can't. That it was time for me try something else. But I did come to the United States. I came to New York in '98, and I was slightly lost. I didn't know anybody really, and what I did is I joined a cricket club, and I felt a lot better once I'd done that. And of course, New York cricket was quite different from the cricket I was used to, which had been played mainly in England and before then in Holland, as a kind of genteel pastime. In New York, the cricket was uh, tough, and the conditions were difficult. And nobody in New York wants you to play cricket. They're always trying to stop you from playing cricket, and nobody understands what you're doing. They treat the whole thing with suspicion. And so, but of course, the players themselves come from all over the world and are joined by this kind of obsessive interest in the game. And I was one of those players. And it was after a few years of doing that that I realized that potentially there was a story there, and that I started to write about it. And
Well,
it became the novel which you refer to, Netherland, um, which was set in New York in the aftermath of 9/11 and set amongst the cricket players of New York.
yes, a brilliant title too, I must say. I've thought it's caused me to think about that.
Well, I'll take a thank you. I won't tell you what the original terrible title, working title was.
There's a book of those that I recently picked up at the bookstore in Lenox. There's a book of original titles of famous books. Marvelous thing to read.
Oh, that is interesting. All the bad titles that got discarded.
All the foul balls, whatever the cricket.
Yes, the foul balls, all the mishits.
Now, in terms of your own life experiences of fish out of water, I believe I'm using perhaps the right word, perhaps the wrong word, that originally you perhaps viewed English studies as a bit too twee, and you studied for the bar and became a barrister. Now, in my experience, in fact, if you scratch a lawyerly chrysalis, a writer emerges. Is that true?
I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. Lawyers are very interested in language. It depends what, I mean, there are lots of kinds of lawyers. I'm speaking of chrysalises, they're highly varietal, like butterflies. And the kind of lawyer I was the lawyer who wore a wig and appeared in court. And I did kind of mainly, although far from exclusively, kind of business contract disputes. Um, the thing is, if you stay as a lawyer, I practiced for about 15 years. If I'd stayed much longer, I really was in danger of becoming, your sense of language as a lawyer becomes highly kind of systematic and potentially cliched. Um, and So on the one hand, it's extremely important to sort of express yourself accurately in when you write the cases down too, when you do write the pleadings, as we used to call them. Um, and on the other hand, it's sort of there are habits of mind and habits of speech that you don't want to have you don't want to become too wedded to. Um, but I do feel like there are some great stylists among the lawyers. Um, and I think American judges in particular enjoy writing what they would perceive to be stylish judgments.
Indeed, they do. I think a number of them are way too fond of quoting Bob Dylan, for example.
I know
But
Scalia fancied himself as a writer.
very much
His
so.
prose, you could see that he had this kind of was rather pleased with himself.
Yes. Now, but you could imagine what a wonderful publicity still you could have had for your books with the wig.
Well, in my day, it wasn't allowed. You were not permitted by the bar council to be photographed in your wig. But now I think it's all changed. I think you can do anything now. It's all that's the way things are going. Everything is permitted, and unfortunately, I can't locate my wig. It's very smelly, and it's somewhere. I think it's in storage somewhere. I have no idea what happened to it, but Maybe one day I'll dig it up. No, you won't catch me wearing it.
There could be I'm starting to sense a New Yorker story though in that errant wig, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Um, Now, the title of the Authors Guild event that you're appearing at is Why Writers Matter. Now, you are a political essayist as well as a short story writer and a novelist. Is that just an interest, or is that part of how you ensure writing and writers matter by commenting on the matters of the day? Remember, in Dickens' time, he did it through novels.
Yeah.
Today, perhaps we need the essays as well as the novels. What do you think? Why do you do that? Are you just a polymath writer or purpose?
Um, I was just a citizen, and I write the political stuff as a concerned citizen, and I became extremely concerned, like a lot of people in 2016, and I began to take an interest in politics and in because I don't know if you'll recall, but after the 2016 election, it wasn't just that Trump became the president, but there was a complete the map was completely red, and even on the local level. Local government was very much in the hands of the Republican Party, and as a sort of good liberal, I was kind of horrified by what was happening, and I started to sort of think about what had gone on and what might be the way forward. And what I soon discovered very quickly as I became involved, or interested, I should say, more than involved, in local New York races, legislature for the New York government in Albany. What I discovered to my horror was that the Democratic Party, as it then existed, was simply not equipped to take on the Republicans. And so I began to write essays about the Democratic Party and how it might approach politics and kind of reform itself to be kind of more adversarial and less corrupt and do the job which Americans would expect a political party to do, which is to try and gain power and hold on to it and use it. Um, and so out of that, I was very fortunate. Then I started to write political essays, mainly for the New York Review of Books. And I sort of feel that it almost, for certainly in the short term, it interfered with my writing fiction. I mean, like everyone else, everyone sort of donated hundreds of hours, again, compulsory sort of donation, kind of pro bono worrying and thinking about politics. And, we all remember those years and which are still ongoing in many ways, when and the political kind of interest that people took in the country was much more intense. And and that has interfered in my case with my rather sort of with my sort of private wish to more private preoccupations, which have to do with language and human beings and the stuff of novels. I mean, although my novels are obviously capable of being interpreted in political ways as well.
You made me think there of how struck I was recently to read that Don Winslow, who's a wonderful American novelist, has given up novel writing. He's officially said in favor of political action. So,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
that's
I mean, the Writers Guild is in the sort of on the cusp of all of that. And Jennifer Regan was herself, I think, has been very much involved in human rights stuff, um, but has successfully continued to be productive and brilliant. Um, Ultimately, it will feed your work, hopefully, and it's possible that it sort of fed my most recent novel, Godwin, um, and and certain aspects of that book.
I was about to ask you about that, and also just your sport metaphor or obsession, right? Because soccer is at the heart of Godwin. So, can you tell us about that? Does that just work for you, or is it just literally your interest?
You know, you I am interested in soccer, and I became more. I mean. I was obviously much more interested in it when I was playing it a lot because, I used to play soccer in the winter and I used to play cricket in the summer. And I was an obsessive Manchester United fan. And in recent years, because everything seemed so sort of dark and difficult, um, on the sphere, in the political sphere, I sort of became more interested in soccer again and in my team, Manchester United, which unfortunately has been in the doldrums for the last decade. So I was getting it on. So on the one, I felt like there was no respite. And even now, the team is struggling. They just can't seem to do anything right. But thankfully, things are looking up a bit more politically. So there's a chink of light there. And so I became interested. But I do feel like I have devoted, I mean, just countless hours of my life to watching sport and thinking about sport and being moved by sport. And I guess I've got nothing else to put into my novels, you know. And for that it is what it is. It's and also, of course, I'm aware that soccer is a kind of universal language. It's not an American thing. It's more of a global kind of part of the global culture. It's a very strong element, actually, of the global culture. If you travel anywhere, you can do much. It really is a sort of important way of connecting to local people to wear your soccer shirt if you've got one, and you'll find that the people you meet, including Africa, which is at the kind of site of some of the action in Godwin, people are kind of love the game everywhere, and it's an important kind of zone of connection.
Well, one last perhaps major tributary or feeder of the river of your work and your influences, so I think would be the Irish literary canon. And
Yeah.
you mentioned Seamus Heaney earlier, and gosh, there are so many. And even thinking now, I mean, I'm thinking of others that I read in addition to yourself, Flynn Barry and Colum McCann, and I could rattle off a dozen right now. Is
Mhm.
that an active or meaningful community to you? Do you feel a particular kinship there?
Well, we blurb each other. There is a slight, if someone asks me to blurb an Irish writer, there's a decent chance I'll blurb them. I don't normally, you know, either ask for or do that. But there is a sort of kinship there. I do feel like I'm slightly removed from the kind of amazing scene of Irish Renaissance. I mean, I say Renaissance, as you rightly point out. Was there ever a time when there wasn't a Renaissance? And it's always been sort of alive and vital since I would guess the 1700s. When it starts with Jonathan Swift and the literary tradition um, of colonial Ireland, and which was carried on, obviously. And in fact, I'm teaching a class in Irish literature at Bard College, where I work this semester. Um, so there are many, but I actually like the poets. They're the ones who I really read. I mean, obviously James Joyce and Beckett are enormously influential when I was growing up, enormously influential, and but also Seamus Heaney and Paul Muldoon and Yeats. Obviously, you never lose your interest in Yeats. You can somehow, I mean, a few years can go by and you haven't really read it, then you pick it up again, and then you're kind of blown away by it all over again. So. It is a tradition which I'm very indebted to, although my own participation in that tradition is a little complicated by the fact that I've been kind of I was born in Ireland, my father's Irish, but my mother's Turkish, and although I've always been an Irish national, I've never sort of partaken of the kind of I've never really lived there for much, or more than about 6 months as an adult, or maybe a year. And so I've never really been part of the, I suppose, Irish literary scene in a way that others have. But I definitely identify as Irish, and certainly as an Irish writer, even if the others, even if I'm not necessarily identified as such by our other Irish writers.
Well, final question, just as any kind of tantalizing you can do for our viewing and reading audience. Any next novel in the works? I know that might be bad luck, but any subject matter?
I wish I could jinx myself with my next project, but right now I've sort of, I'm focused on short stories at the moment. I'm publishing them quite regularly, by my standards. I don't write that much in the New Yorker, and so that's my immediate um, focus. I don't really have any kind of anything else in the works right now.
Well, they're wonderful. Your short stories are always something I look forward to in the New Yorker and wherever your work appears. It's been a delight speaking today. I hope our
It has,
viewers,
Dalton. It has been a
uh,
delight.
thank you. I hope that our viewers and readers all pick up some more of your work and follow you, and of course, come to the Authors Guild event at the end of September in Lenox, at the Shakespeare and Company event, the 27th to the 29th of September. And viewers, if you are already a subscriber to the Berkshire Eagle, thank you. If you're not yet a subscriber, please consider becoming one. It's conversations such as these with wonderful essayist and novelist Joseph O'Neill that we bring you, as well as all our work in the paper. I will see you next time on Eagle Reels and in the pages of the Berkshire Eagle.